Hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining this stream. Today is 12th of June. Now it's 11 o'clock in the morning Moscow time, and I have prepared quite a number of news on some major developments that Russian media and public is paying attention to, and I hope you will find this episode informative and useful. Before I start our new segment, let me just remind you that you can send any question or the comment that you want to highlight during these programs through PayPal or Boosty platform, or you can use a super chat on Rumble for that matter. I remind you that I'm streaming simultaneously on YouTube and Rumble channels. And of course, after news segment, if there will be any questions or the comments, I will react on it. And so that's been said, let's go through some news now. And first of all, dear friends, let me congratulate everybody with Russia Day. I know 99% of views on my videos are from outside of Russia, but nevertheless, majority of our community, I believe, don't see Russia or the Russians as their enemies, and hopefully you will join this celebration, this congratulation. So happy Russia Day to everybody. Since 1995, this day being celebrated, this holiday in Russia as a Russia Day. A greater, relatively new tradition that will last for centuries, hopefully. So happy Russia's Day, everybody. And let's go through some other news. Now, RIA Novosti is reporting, dear friends, that Russian president held a meeting on the state of armament program. And this happened yesterday. And this was the first time when Russian president spoke about Russian nuclear triad since the recent attacks on Russian strategical bomber fleet in 2 airfields. I'll give you some key points from statements that Russian president made during this meeting. So the president, Vladimir Putin, held a meeting on the state armament program. The head of state noted Russia's success in this area and gave instructions on developing the defense industry. The main statements are the implementation period for the state armament program is from 2027 to 2036. So in this 10-year 10-year period, Russian armed forces will rearm big time with latest weapons. It will affect their entire range of their weapons. Russian president said new state program should set guidelines for the formation of long-term production plans for the defense industry. The state program must be linked in terms of time frames and their activities to the program for the development of the military-industrial complex. The state program will also reflect the current needs of the armed forces. Particular attention should be paid to a nuclear triad. Vladimir Putin said the nuclear triad remains the guarantor of the Russian sovereignty. And therefore, by the way, I was absolutely correct while saying that recent attack on Russian nuclear triad cannot and will not be ignored by Moscow. As I said, this is the first time since that attack that Russian president spoke about topic of nuclear triad. He also went to say that Russian defense enterprises with the state support have increased production volumes many times over the recent years. Russia needs to take into account global trends in the development of military technologies, especially since the number of countries that are actively working in this direction is growing. It is also obvious that the emphasis in the new state program should be placed on the creation of most modern weapon systems. According to President, it is important to increase the combat capabilities of the ground forces, and it is necessary to calculate the needs in advance and begin preparing the infrastructure for the deployment of the new weapon systems, including bases, arsenals, and airfields. And in this on this point, I guess Russian president meant that, well, no longer Russian planes, strategical bombers or otherwise, will be stationed, I guess, under the open sky, as it was agreed in the START treaty, for example. And that's why many people are still not realizing and asking questions why Russian bombers were in open air. That's why it was a part of the START and SWORD treaties, right? President also stated that it is necessary to provide a set of systemic measures for the creation, modernization, and repair of aircraft equipment. It is important to increase their export potential of the Russian weapons and equipment, especially those models that have been tested in a real combat operations. The new state program should become a tool for implementing the Navy development strategy until 2050. It is also necessary to develop a well-thought-out personnel policy and take into account in advance the possibility of producing civilian products at the defense enterprises. These are some of the key points that Russian president made during this meeting on the topic of rearmament, basically, of the Russian militaries. And as I already said, first time Russian president mentioned the nuclear triad. And as far as I can tell, this is not random stuff, obviously. If you were observing policies of the Russian president, his steps, then you would not be surprised that whenever there is some crisis situation, Russian president never reacts based on emotions. He always takes time, analyzes the situation, learns whatever additional information is available, including from security services. And when concrete steps are being basically worked out, only then Russian president usually is making statements or reacting on some developments. He did not speak about particularly that attack on Russian nuclear triad, Russian airfields that were housing strategical bombers. And I remind you, dear friends, that that attack was conducted formally by Kyiv regime, but obviously with the direct involvement of US, CIA, potentially Pentagon, and for 100% British MI6 and British political elites, right? And because Russian president mentioned the nuclear triad, I can assume that, well, certain retaliatory steps have been prepared. What those retaliatory steps are, I cannot know, obviously. And with the exception of few people, probably no one knows. And whatever it is, I think it is highly likely that this retaliation against countries, hostile states that were involved in this attack on Russian nuclear triad, this retaliation will be conducted in a way that will allow Moscow to maintain plausible deniability. This is my understanding of their situation, and that's why I am paying attention to it. Many of you probably, dear friends, noticed that after those attacks on Russian military airfields and strategical bombers, there was quite a fast reaction from Washington. US president called Russian president, and Trump tried at least to ensure Russian colleague, Russian president, that he had no knowledge about this attack on Russian nuclear triad, and he tried to paint a picture that US was not involved. It's not just a Trump, by the way, but on several occasions, the head of Pentagon, Pete Hegseth, also made it clear that US was not engaged in this attack on Russian nuclear triad. And I believe head of State Department Marco Rubio also made a comment on that, highlighting that US was not participating in that operation. I don't know what is your take on that. Do you believe these statements or not? I definitely don't. But what I think is that potentially, some, as many Western experts, by the way, American experts that have some insight about works of CIA, for example, as they are saying, for decades, there is a certain rogue groups inside the CIA that are not really under control of anybody. And American experts, for example, Scott Ritter, during his recent interviews, highlighted that it is possible that the so-called Russia House, CIA element, most likely was informed and even engaged in preparations of this operation. Potentially, maybe President of US Trump was also briefed on the matter, but in general terms, so that he possibly did not really knew what was going to happen. And probably he did not knew that British MI6 and CIA's this group, Russia House or whatever it is, and their proxy regime in Kiev were planning to attack Russian nuclear triad. So maybe this is the true, right? Exactly what happened. But in any case, we are clearly seeing certain pattern that Washington is trying to distance itself from these attacks on Russian nuclear triad, while we have not heard any statements whatsoever from London, from United Kingdom. And I think this silence on part of United Kingdom indicates direct involvement of British political, military, and intelligence elites or their community in this attack on Russian nuclear triad. And they just have nothing to say, basically. And they know perfectly well, I guess, that Russia also well informed about their participation, right? And after all, I remind you, dear friends, that just a couple of days ago, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that while commenting on these terrorist attacks on Russia, on railway network, when a passenger train was also targeted by terrorists, and also, while commenting on attacks on Russian nuclear triad, he said that potentially certain elements in US by inertia were involved in this plot, but UK was involved 100%. That's what Russian foreign minister said, and he has access to potentially almost all the classified information that there is, right? He has one of the highest level of access to classified information, so he knew what he was talking about. And therefore, now when Russian president spoke about nuclear triad, I think we are getting closer and closer to a point when, retaliation will happen, and everyone in this world would understand that you cannot attack nuclear forces. It's just not just irresponsible, but it's extremely dangerous for literally everybody on this planet. And dear friends, yesterday I watched an interview of Jeffrey Sachs, US professor. All of you are familiar, obviously, with Jeffrey Sachs and his work. And my impression was that he was kind of terrified when he, with what happened with these attacks on Russian nuclear triad. And he openly said that Kiev regime and its backers basically endangered everybody on this planet, including his own family. He was outraged, by the way, right? And for reasons. And therefore, I think whatever retaliation is going to be, it will be in a scale that will forever cement the knowledge in this world that in no circumstances you can attack nuclear triad of other country if you are not intending to start a nuclear war. So let's see how situation is going to develop, but I think we are really, really close to some very major developments. Let's say that way, and I'm quite convinced, by the way, based on my reading on the big picture, that whatever is going to be that retaliation, Moscow will probably maintain plausible deniability on its hands, although who knows, maybe even direct actions will be taken. We will find out soon. And when it comes to rearmament of the Russian military, dear friends, yesterday I shared on my Telegram and Twitter X page this information that there was a ceremony of transfer of submarine Yakutsk, which is a Project 636-3 into Russian Navy. Ceremony took place in St. Petersburg. This, I believe, diesel-electric submarine, and this type of submarine is being called a black hole, by the way, because they are extremely silent and almost undetectable. So this submarine is armed with 6 torpedo tubes, as well as caliber cruise missiles. So, you know, they are very capable hunters, for sure. And process of rearmament, rearming of Russian armed forces, the Russian Navy, obviously will continue and only accelerate because, as I already said, this 10-11-year plan that Russian president spoke about yesterday is focused exactly on that, to make sure that by 2036, Russian armed forces are on top of the game, as they are right now, I will say. More news, dear friends. TASS News Agency is reporting that today, on 12th of June, potentially another phase of a POW exchange will take place between Russian side and Kiev regime. So Russia and Ukraine will begin urgent medical exchanges of seriously wounded prisoners of war. Today, on Thursday, Vladimir Medinsky, presidential aide and head of the Russian delegation to their negotiations with Ukraine, stated already, dear friends, 2 stages were conducted when both sides released POWs under 25-year age. There was no information made public about number of POWs that were exchanged between the sides. And today's 3rd phase of this humanitarian process will take place, according to Medinsky, and wounded military personnel, wounded POWs will be also exchanged, which is a positive development, obviously. And when it comes to humanitarian process in this crisis, well, finally, yesterday afternoon, news broke that Turkey regime began accepting bodies of the killed Ukrainian military personnel, soldiers and their officers that Russia, for a 2nd week now, was stating that is ready to transfer to Kiev regime. And first stage of this transfer of 6,000 bodies of the killed Ukrainian military personnel took place yesterday afternoon. Russia handed over bodies of over 1,200 or 1,200 bodies of the killed Ukrainian military personnel, and Moscow has retrieved the remnants of 27 of its service members. And the process probably will continue because I think pressure inside Ukraine, no, despite the attempts of the regime to hide disinformation, to block disinformation, society in Ukraine probably did learn anyways that there was on the border in the Bryansk region, there was refrigerators that were, ready to transfer bodies of killed military personnel of Kiev regime, and pressure probably from inside of Kiev controlled territory and potentially even from outside was so high that eventually Kiev regime did agree to accept its own, killed military personnel. Maybe Zelensky received some guarantees or promises from collective West countries that they will finance Zelensky to be able to pay compensations to the families of these killed military personnel. Process probably will continue, although when it comes to Kiev regime, it's hard to tell what they're going to do. TASS news agency is also reporting that, military expert Andrei Marochko stated that Russian armed forces completely drove out Kiev regime's forces from Stopochki settlement in the DPR. No day, by the way, is passing by without reports about more and more settlements being liberated by Russian armed forces. And, today is absolutely not exception. I'm quite sure more settlements being liberated by Russian troops on the line of contact. And probably later on today, Russian defense minister will give us an update on that. Also, RT is reporting that Ukraine membership is out of NATO summit statement, which is not really surprising, not for our community, I guess, but some people in the West that are only receiving information from propaganda outlets, from Western MSN, like BBC, CNN, MSNBC, France Press, Deutsche Welle, New York Times, and that kind of, Washington Post, or I don't know, Le Figaro, El País, and so on. If they are only receiving information from this garbage media, so-called media outlets, then they would be probably surprised, because they should think that if not today, tomorrow, Ukraine can join NATO, right? Which was never going to happen. But anyways, the prospect of Ukraine joining NATO will not be mentioned in their declaration at the bloc summit later this month. Bloomberg has reported Kiev has long sought to become a member of the US-led organization, terrorist organization, I will add from my side, that NATO is, an aim that Russia was as a threat to its national security. So, okay, nothing extraordinary, but I think this is information that worth some of our attention. There will be no Ukraine mentioning in a final statement of upcoming NATO summit that should take place in Hague, I believe. But nevertheless, collective West countries, NATO member states continue their attempts to prolong this proxy war against Russia as much as they can. And as long as there is anybody left in Kiev-controlled territory to be sacrificed for their geopolitical agenda of the globalists and American neocons and so on. And we have information on that matter that Ukraine expects to receive another 1.7 billion pounds, which is 2.3 billion US dollars from the United Kingdom for additional weapons purchases. Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal stated, and I think members of our community from UK not going to be happy about this news, because UK and basically all the other countries in NATO, by the way, definitely are in no position to continue this proxy war against Russia. But their elites, the so-called ruling elites in those countries, globalists that are in control of these elites, they continue to do whatever they can to prolong this proxy war, because they still believe that they can achieve strategic defeat of Russia, and they are doing this on expense of ordinary people in the West, and this process will continue. I mean, UK is barely capable of taking care of its pensioners, right? And UK's NHS, by the way, is a joke at this point, right? People for 5-6 months are waiting to see doctor, and this is not exaggeration, by the way. Our friends from UK can confirm this. And while society in UK is facing many issues, when social fabric is stretched almost beyond their limits, and this is also not exaggeration. Take a look at their situation in Belfast, by the way, in Northern Ireland. For several days now, there are riots, and people are outraged for a crime that was committed against a young person there. And these riots turned into this anti-migration protests turned into riots. So yes, social fabric is stretched beyond limits. That's for sure. And it's not just the Belfast, by the way, all over the UK. And while this is happening, London is finding another 1.7 billion pounds to further prolong this proxy war against Russia, by the way. If this is not a crime against the British people committed by British government, then you tell me what this is. And UK is obviously not alone in this. As I said, globalists are in control of majority of countries in EU, right? In Europe. And Germany is also there. And German defense minister arrived today in Kiev in unannounced visit. And as it was reported by the DPA agency, he intends to familiarize himself with the situation on the ground and discuss with the Ukrainian leadership the provision of new military aid package, which is also going to be for additional billions and billions of euros, most likely, at least hundreds of millions that could be used for German people, right? To improve life of German people. But no, German government has some other intentions and interests, not their own people and their well-being. And meanwhile, we have also interesting news, dear friends, that Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk stated that his country had received the nuclear security guarantees from France. And this is quite interesting news in my understanding, because last time I checked, Poland was a NATO member state, and France is also a NATO member state. UK, another nuclear armed country in NATO, is also in Europe, is also NATO member state, and the US, main nuclear power in the Western world, is also a NATO member state. And still Poland was seeking additional security guarantees, and they spoke to France. This is laughable, man. This is a joke. And they asked France to provide these additional security guarantees. By the way, NATO membership means nothing, really. And I think most likely this is the case. Or Polish leadership is just too scared. Which one is? Maybe both, right? Because you are a member of this organization in which 3 countries already have nuclear weapons. Do you really need additional agreements with France? And one should keep in mind, by the way, that France was a guarantor of security of Poland before Nazi Germany attacked it. I believe France was a guarantor of Poland. And what France did? Nothing, right? France lost battle with their war with Nazi Germany in like 4 weeks' time. Poland was, by the way, fighting longer than France against Nazi Germany. Anyways, you tell me, dear friends, what you think. Does NATO membership really means anything anymore? Otherwise, why would Poland seek some additional security guarantees from NATO member states? What's going on there? I don't know. But before I continue, dear friends, and there is a very important news on some major developments. Middle East is seems like one step away from a regional war, unfortunately, as I predicted. But before I continue, let me remind you, dear friends, that this independent media project of mine is completely subscriber funded, or exists only as long as I have your support, and this project has your support. And if you like my work, if you find it informative, interesting, useful, please consider to support her. You can do it through several means. You can donate through PayPal. And when it comes to PayPal, dear friends, I see several times when members of community are commenting that they are trying to donate through PayPal, but they are failing. I guess that's because they are using older account. And for last how many months now, I'm using new account, right? My wife created her PayPal account, and she's helping me now with that. So new accounts link is under every video, by the way. So if you automatically were trying to send a donation with your old account, obviously you would not succeed, because I'm using new account now. And the link to that new account is under this video in the description box and in the pinned comment. Also, you can donate through Boosty platform. You can send a tip or donation, or you can subscribe to my page on Boosty, where I have quite a lot of extra content, as I do on Patreon. And of course, you can subscribe to my Patreon page also. If somehow, by some miracle, our community on Patreon and Boosty will double, at that point, probably I'll be able to say that this project is no longer in a danger zone, and it can survive. But until that day, it's a constant struggle, and it's nerve-breaking, by the way. So yes, I mean, there is these several means that you can support that I already mentioned. And during the live stream, by the way, you can use, of course, a Rumble platform. You can donate through Rumble. You can use Super Chat there. You can become premium subscriber if you want to. So there is quite a number of means for support. And also crypto, by the way. If you are good with crypto, you will find crypto addresses under this video in the description box and in the pinned comment also, as all the other links. And many thanks, dear friends. Many thanks to everybody who already helped and continues to support and allows me to stay in this field of news and political commentary. Third year, by the way. Third year. Truly grateful. Thank you. And dear friends, let's continue with some more news now. And as I said, unfortunately, Middle East is getting way too close to regional war, as I was predicting. And for example, RIA Novosti is reporting that according to Western media, CBS to be more precise, Israel is ready to launch an operation in Iran against Islamic Republic, against nuclear facilities of Iran, and God knows what else. So Israel is fully prepared to begin a military operation in Iran. The American TV channel CBS News reported, citing US sources. And this is obviously extremely dangerous. At the same time, it is noted that Washington expects that Iran may launch a retaliatory strike against some American facilities if in neighboring Iraq, and I will add, not just in neighboring Iraq, all over the Middle East, most likely, if Iran is attacked. And for example, we have this report that U.S. embassy in Iraq prepares to send 1,000 staff members home to conduct evacuation, basically. So the U.S. embassy in Baghdad is preparing to return 1,000 employees back to the United States as a part of cost-cutting program. Yes, cost-cutting program. Al-Haddad TV channel reported And this is definitely evacuation that is taking place. And it's not just Iraq, by the way. Yesterday, late evening, I posted on my Telegram and Twitter X page this news, for example, that U.S. Naval Forces Command in Bahrain, home of the Fifth Fleet, and their CENTCOM has been placed on high alert. Families of American servicemen have been advised to prepare for possible evacuation aimed rising regional tensions. This comes as U.S.-Iran negotiations stall and military posturing intensifies across the Gulf. In reality, it's not Gulf or the Gulf states, it's U.S. and Israel that are escalating. And we have information from Iran also that, excuse me, Tehran warns US and Israel that any act of aggression will be caught by surprise. This was reported by surprise steps from Iran. This was reported by Iranian press TV. Iran is at its highest level of military readiness. Also noted, this came as reports say Israel may strike Iran in coming days without U.S. assistance, and obviously this is all BS when it comes to Israeli strikes. Obviously, all the steps, all the actions against Iran will be closely coordinated, and is closely coordinated between Israel, U.S., UK, and potentially a number of other countries, NATO member states included. And also, in addition, dear friends, we have this report that Western media is also reporting, not just Iranian press TV, but Western media, New York Times, for example, that Iran has developed a plan to retaliate in case of Israeli attack. Iran has developed a plan for retaliatory strike in the event of attack from Israel. New York Times writes, so Iranian military and government officials have already met to discuss their response to a potential Israeli strike. Tehran has developed a response plan that could include an immediate counterattack on Israel using hundreds of ballistic missiles. A newspaper is stating, citing sources, and yet again, one should keep in mind that just a day or two ago, Iran's defense ministry stated that if a country is attacked, they will take action against all U.S. military assets in a region, not just against Israel, but also against U.S. military assets in a region. And when it comes to U.S. assets, it's tens of thousands of troops and there are dozens of bases, literally dozens of military bases all around Iran, right? Almost all around Iran. Afghanistan might be exception. And although I'm not even sure about that, because recently, you remember, there was information on the internet that Washington was considering to make a deal with the Taliban government of Afghanistan so that US will have access again to Bagram airfield, which definitely can be used to station equipment there and then use it against Iran. And by the way, let's take a look at the map. This is, as I said many times before, these developments around Iran definitely not comes as a surprise to me, and probably wouldn't come as a surprise to majority of our community, because for many times I did try to explain my vision of the situation in regards to Iran, Middle East, and in regards to geopolitical struggle between the collective West and China. And I believe when it comes to Iran or the regional war in the Middle East, Israeli government, Zionists, Israeli lobby in US, American neocons, by the way, and also globalists, they all are on the same page. They all have, for their particular reasons, but they all want regional war to happen in the Middle East. They all want Iran to be attacked. And I will explain once again why I think so. When it comes to Israel, by the way, it is obvious Israel was quite, they were really hide too much that their strategy is to weaken every country in the region, which will allow them to basically dominate, and that's what they do. Israel used its influence in US to basically obliterate with US force many countries in the Middle East, right? From Iraq to Libya to Syria, I mean, you name it. Iran is definitely on that list, right? And therefore, obviously, Israel is using its influence to orchestrate attack on Iran. Israel on itself, on its own, cannot do that. But, well, with American help, with help of US, UK, and a number of other NATO member states, probably they have a hope that they can destroy Iran and put some puppet regime there afterwards. That's Israeli side. When it comes to US neocons, well, US neocons are always about wars, right? That's how they make money. US neocons, deep state, military industrial complex, CIA, they are all in bed with each other, right? They all make money. They all increase their influence based on constant wars, right? That's why US is always engaged in some wars, by the way, on this planet. So that's the neocons' reasoning. And also, by the way, when it comes to globalists and Western ruling class in general, they want regional war to happen in the Middle East, which will be provoked undoubtedly if they are attacking Iran. Their interest is to shut down navigation in the Persian Gulf and through Hormuz Strait, so that their main beneficiary of their energy from this region, China, will experience some major economical issues, right? Because no countries in this world, by the way, can compensate for a volume of oil and gas that will be lost from a world energy market, if regional war in the Middle East is provoked and Persian Gulf and Hormuz Strait are shut down, right? So globalists and the Western ruling class in general, they want to basically harm China, to strike China and Chinese economy. That's why they want also a regional war to be started. And as you can see, dear friends, all the influential forces, in my reading of the big picture anyways, all the influential forces are in the West are on the same page when it comes to Middle East. They all have interest to attack Iran, to create a regional war, right? For different reasons, maybe Israel has its own reasoning, neocons their own reasoning, globalists or Western ruling class in general their own, right? But they all want a regional escalation in the Middle East, and I'm afraid that's exactly what is going to happen. And there was many indicators, by the way, that U.S. administration were not an honest actor in these talks with Iran that was taking place during the previous couple of months. I believe 5 rounds of negotiations had already happened. Iran was compromising and was very open to reach the deal with the American side. After all, it was Iran's proposal that they will agree a consortium to be created in the Middle East, part of which will become Iran's nuclear facilities that are engaged in enrichment of uranium. And this consortium and their Iranian plants will be under IAEA's control, or under control of, not control, but under observation, monitoring of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, which is on its own controlled by US. So if Washington was an honest actor, it would agree on this deal, on this compromise from Iranian side, but it did not. It did not, and Trump and many other officials in US time and again were stating that Iran should completely get rid of enrichment capabilities. Perfectly well while they knew perfectly well that this is a red line that cannot be crossed. Iran did not sacrifice tens of years, did not spend, and many scientists, by the way, that were killed, literally killed by Israeli secret services. Iran did not spend billions of dollars on an educational program, right? On building these facilities to reach technological level of being able to enrich uranium, to give up now all of it, right? This is not happening. But they were compromising, right? They were ready to join this consortium, allow US, IAEA to have a presence there, direct or indirect, and constantly monitor the situation to be sure that Iran is not enriching uranium beyond whatever is necessary for nuclear reactors, civilian nuclear reactors, right? But the US is refusing to take this deal, this compromise from Iran. And well, now we are receiving these reports that well, US is beginning to evacuate its civilian personnel for now. Recently, we had reports that US was transferring additional air defense systems into region. Preparations are underway, by the way. The US was engaged with Turkey, with Saudi Arabia, UAE, number of other regional countries, even with Afghanistan leadership, by the way, to somehow, to prepare basically as much as possible ground for potential attack on Iran, and to make sure that these regional countries will either support this aggression against Iran or at least would stay neutral. And now I'm afraid we are getting like step closer or step away maybe even from the final escalation, which is which is going to be absolutely tragic for this world, by the way, for Middle East, obviously, and for the rest of the world. And if US will actually get engaged in military hostilities against Iran, that might be a beginning of the end of US itself. And while all this stuff is happening, by the way, this morning, this news broke that Omani foreign minister confirmed that a new round of US-Iran talks will still take place on Sunday in Muscat, capital of Oman. Earlier, obviously, doubts were cast on these talks, and reports of possible military clash. And to be honest, I have some doubts that this sixth round of negotiations will even take place. It is a sixth round, isn't it? If I remember correctly. We will find out. Today is first day, isn't it? So let's see how the situation develops next several days. But I'm afraid US was never honest in these talks. They were just gaining time to prepare as much as they can for military hostilities against Iran. And I guess US leadership, Israeli leadership, British leadership, and leadership of some other countries that are going to be involved in this aggression against Iran are thinking that they are ready now. And that's why we are seeing now this escalation. Yet again, from the collective West, right? From Israel and from US. Because Iran on its own is saying that we are ready for compromise, but we're going to defend ourselves. What else you expect, by the way? So that's the situation with Iran and the Middle East. Something big is about to happen there. Something dramatic and extremely dangerous for the world, in my understanding. And meanwhile, US itself, by the way, is experiencing some domestic, quite serious domestic issues. And for example, according to RIA Novosti, NBC News reported that special forces with armored vehicles are planned to be deployed in 5 democratic states. And that means scale of these riots in US is increasing, and more states being engulfed now, which once again can be seen as an indicator that all these protests and riots were sort of a pre-planned operation of certain influential or very influential groups inside the US. Let's see how long it will take for Washington to basically reestablish control over the situation. But for now, it seems like these rioters, protesters, and whatever forces are behind them have an upper hand, and they are on offensive, increasing geography of their activity. RT is also reporting that U.S. President Donald Trump made yet another claim that a deal with China is done. So Washington has finalized a long-sought trade deal with Beijing. U.S. President Donald Trump announced on social media on Wednesday. The agreement is still awaiting his final approval and that of Chinese President Xi Jinping. He added, and dear friends, I don't know about you, but I'm going to always doubt whatever Trump is going to say or whatever he's saying. How long he is in White House now? Like 150 days, maybe a bit more. And how many times we see situation when one day he's saying one thing, next day something else, and day after news is reported that all of it was total nonsense, right? And therefore, I don't know what to make of this news. Trump is saying that they have reached some agreement with China, but I'm not. I don't think so. To put it mildly, I just don't think so. Let's see. Today, probably Chinese foreign ministry will make some statements, and we will find out what Trump is talking about. And also, when it comes to how trustworthy Trump is, by the way, he also stated that he has a great relationship with Putin, Russian president. So U.S. President Donald Trump has declared the good relations with the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, and said that their telephone conversation on June 4 was devoted to settling the conflict in Ukraine. Okay, and do you can believe that Trump and Putin have a great relationship or good relationships? No, man. Especially after Trump basically insulted Putin, Russian president, calling him crazy, and when Trump insulted Russian people and Russia, while saying that Moscow is for no reason at all, is conducting long-range strikes on military and logistical infrastructure of the Kyiv regime, while at that point, those attacks were retaliatory strikes for terrorist activity of Kyiv regime on Russian soil. So Trump, by saying so, also said basically that he don't value lives of Russian people. And now he's saying that after all that, he thinks that he has a good relationships with Putin. I don't know, man. This individual is in some other universe, man. Clearly, and I think it will only take maybe a couple of more months, and mental health of Trump definitely is going to become a big topic of discussion, because he is just acting too irrationally. There is very little adequacy in whatever he is doing. And this is unfortunate, by the way, because worldwide, I will say, and in US also, and also in Russia, there was clearly hope, by the way. And even I felt for that hope for a short time, that maybe under this new administration, it will be possible to de-escalate between Washington and Moscow. But unfortunately, I was mistaken while failing to that hope, and everybody else in this world. And as time goes by, this is becoming more and more clear. Although my initial instincts, by the way, was actually correct. You remember I was saying that nothing serious or fundamental will come out from these talks between Washington and Moscow, because Washington cannot be trusted. And I was correct, by the way, from the beginning. But then, yet again, because I want the escalation to happen, I want West to stop fueling this proxy war against Russia. I want peace. I fail as for this hope that maybe there is a chance, but no, man, there is not. Until Western ruling elites are not forced to de-escalate, they're not going to de-escalate nothing. They're not going to stop because they just don't know how to do it, I guess. And they are not ready to face the reality. Few more news, dear friends. Vzgled newspaper is reporting that Hungary and Slovakia threatened to block 18th sanctions package of EU against Russia. Well, good information, it seems like, but yet again, we are hearing such statements from Bratislava and Budapest time and again, but eventually they always agree on these new sanction packages. So therefore, probably exactly same will happen this time. And whenever European Commission will come up with this, and European Union basically will come up with this 18th package when it will be finalized. Unfortunately, Slovakia and Hungary will vote for it, I guess. And by doing so, they will harm their own economies and interests of their own people. But I guess pressure of Brussels is such, Brussels and the globalists, their puppet regimes in Europe, is such that they just cannot withstand it. Current leadership of these two countries. I guess that is the reason why time and again, in the beginning of the process of creation of new package sanctions, they are saying we're going to vote against it, we're going to veto it. And when it comes to actual voting, they are supporting it. Our team, meanwhile, is also reporting that EU push to target Russian oil exports will have consequences, stated the Russian president. The European Commission's push to lower their price cap on Russian oil exports risks of fuel instability in the global energy market, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has stated, and is absolutely correct. You don't have to be expert in energy sector, isn't it, to know this. Russia is one of the major exporters of oil and gas, and if there is any disruption in Russian exports, for sure that will create turbulence on the energy market and will pump prices up. And this is already happening, by the way. This is already happening due to information that is coming from Middle East. For example, price of the Brent oil on the ICE exchange in London exceeded $70 per barrel for the first time since April, right? So energy prices, turbulence is already there on energy market, right? And now, due to risk that in upcoming days or maybe weeks, Israel, US, and then some others are going to attack Iran. And if they will attack Iran, obviously oil price is going to skyrocket and reach, I don't know, $150 per barrel, $200 per barrel, something like that. And when that will happen, and the EU simultaneously and collective West countries will try to block Russian oil to reach market, then you can imagine what kind of perfect storm will be created in energy markets and in economies of this world, because everything depends on energy, right? Prices of bread, from bread and milk to, I don't know, car and the plane, everything price-wise depends on energy prices and energy supplies, right? Anyways, one more news, dear friends, and I will end news segment of this episode. this live stream, TASS news agency is reporting that Russia supplied unprecedented 10 million tons of grain to Egypt last year. So latest statistics become available about grain exports, and the TASS highlighted that Russia became the top supplier of grain to Egypt and delivered more than 10 million tons there as of the end of 2024. Russian ambassador in Cairo, Georgy Borisenko, told the TASS news agency, and well, this is great news, by the way. Relationships between Russia and African countries are improving literally on daily basis, right? And Russia definitely is becoming a breadbasket, not just for Africa, but for the rest of the world. And this process is unstoppable. This process will continue, and give it another 20, 30 years. And well, I mean, I guess maybe 20, 30% of their food in this world will be generated from Russia. Maybe even more, by the way, because potential of Russian agricultural sector is just tremendous, isn't it? After all, Russia is the biggest country in this world, isn't it? And with new technologies, I mean, volumes of harvest is becoming obviously, I mean, higher. So if globalists, by the way, did not provoke Third World War, you know, Russia will make sure that hunger is going to become something of their past, and world will have enough food for sure. Not alone. There are many other countries that are playing big role on when it comes to food export, but Russia is definitely going to be a major player in this regard on food market. And that's it, dear friends, for a news segment. There was no questions or the comments since yesterday's live stream through PayPal or the Boosty platform to highlight. And I guess there was no super chat on Rumble. Hi, was there any super chat? Just a sec, dear friends. My wife will help me now. Okay, there was no super chatter on Rumble also, so therefore I will end this live stream, dear friends. Thank you all for your attention. Have a wonderful day and take care.